Hello, Pierre. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Fahim. Super nice meeting you, and very excited to talk about ground station with you in this podcast.
Indeed, indeed. I think there's a lot to talk about, but we can start with a simple and direct question. What made you look at the state of the satellite connectivity market and think, I can do it better, and let me build this canopy?
Yeah, so I think the genesis of that was when I started my career. I joined Airbus OneWeb project. So I was designing the assembly line and delivering it for the first one in Toulouse, and then the two other ones in Florida to basically mass produce satellites and operating an assembly line that would produce two satellites per day. But
Wow.
being there, I saw and I was constantly in discussion with the OneWeb team that was supposed to deploy a network of 600 plus ground stations all over the world. And I mean, assembling and mass manufacturing satellites was a challenge, but the deployment of such network was another one. And so I kept this idea in mind. I After this experience, I joined Loft Orbital, with basically a satellite operator that proposed a business model where they sell satellite as a service, and it's basically they fly your payload and they share the satellite resources beyond between different customers. So it's basically space infrastructure sold as a service and shared between different customers. We and I saw being there that this business model was very efficient, was very fitted to address the growing low Earth orbit market with all of the new space players, and so I noticed different things. First, that the business model was very efficient of sharing the infrastructure and selling it as a service. The second thing was that the business of low Earth orbit market was growing and expanding. The third thing I noticed is basically all of these satellite operators are now struggling with ground station, because if you think that space is three pillars, the first one is launchers, so you need the launcher to send your satellite. The second one is the satellite itself, like manufacturing these satellites, and the third one is ground stations. You see that the two first pillars, so the launchers and the satellites, have been completely disrupted over the past 10 years by SpaceX, by
Mhm.
other,
Yeah.
who basically divided the cost by 10. So I wouldn't say it's easy now, but it's way more straightforward, way more cheaper, and to some extent way easier. And so that leads to ground station that was not necessarily a bottleneck when we're at the geostationary um, part of the market, where basically we have one satellite, one ground station. Now it's becoming the bottleneck because you need a very large investment to invest in your own ground stations if you want to internalize that. And even if you use current services of ground stations, we saw being at Love that none of the services was truly end to end and was very satisfying in terms of software interface or radio frequency interfaces, or more customer journey or
Mhm.
elements like this. So we saw that here there could be very strong demand to have a plug and play and end-to-end service, and that's one pillar with which we founded SkyNopy, to have basically this end-to-end service, and I can further explain how we do that. But so this was the three thing we noticed being at Loft. Market was growing. Having a business model of selling infra as a service was great, but this bottleneck. On the other side, I remember my experience in OneWeb, and I saw that there were a bunch of ground station network that were out there and that were underused. And this is because when you have a low Earth orbit satellites or constellation operational, I mean, they're constantly like passing over your ground station, and it's very tough to have like the perfect match between like a ground station being like used 100% of
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
time. And so it meant that we had for all of these projects spare capacity. And our idea was basically to leverage their spare capacity and to offer that to space operators who wants to pay like per minute or like per use instead of buying new antennas.
Okay, and so both at OneWeb, your experience at OneWeb and Loft sort of laid the foundations to build what's now SkyNopy, right? To on the one side, you saw the how difficult was it to develop and create a ground segment and how important it is and all the associated business that you could create. And from the other side, you saw sort of the business, no, and
Yeah,
importance of selling as a service. And
yeah. And one like a key element that makes this overall deal like happen is basically where I was in Loft Orbital. I worked with basically the technical director of radio frequency programs. So my current co-founder, Antonin Hirsch, who was himself like a former employee of Thales Space, who saw design like space infrastructure in terms of RF and communication systems, and then was later on in Eutelsat. And when he was in Eutelsat, he had like all of the context of also the OneWeb network. So together we found each other really, and we start discussing about these items, how like the market was growing, how like the bottleneck we were experiencing, and he was personally experiencing being at Loft to interface the communication systems, the modems, and so on, using like a standard ground station as a service providers. So he felt like really him and with this team like the pain point, and he knew about all of the context and
of
the
course,
opportunity of leveraging spare capacity. And so together we like talked, and we became convinced that we could really offer to the market like a better service. And the end vision for us is basically taking the analogy of the mobile phone. You know, back in the days, you were like, you had to know like where were the phone box to have a call, and the phone box you will pay per minute. It's a little bit like what the current market of satellites in low Earth orbit are experiencing. Like they need to know with the satellites with which ground station they will download their data, so they need to know the exact location of each ground
yeah,
station, and they will pay per minute. On top of that, it's even worse because they need to themselves implement all of the protocols, the modulation, the configuration of their signal when they, for example, like a Earth observation constellation, they need to internalize the radio frequency engineers and telecommunication engineers to know like how they will transfer the signal to the ground. So know the onboard equipment, the configuration, the frequency, etc. So we see that like when we take the mobile phone connectivity, like this does not work. And what happened is now like we have like phones where you have a SIM card and you have no idea like where are the antennas, where they are located, which frequency you're using or other. And it's basically our vision of SkyNopy is like to bring that level of connectivity for low Earth orbit satellites, mostly constellation of Earth observation, let's say. So basically, they do their job. They take the right picture at the right time and the right location, and then we do the rest in terms of downloading that data.
that's a great point because well, essentially you want to simplify how to build a satellite and essentially a mission, no? Okay, you just launch a satellite, you do your job with the spacecraft, and then you send me the data and I'll manage to receive that data and put it where you want. That's a great point. But taking perhaps not a step back, but can you sort of give a like an elevator pitch or a quick summary of what SkyNopy does, no? Given this great introduction, and
Yeah.
then well, then I have so many questions about your pace and what you've achieved so far because it's impressive to say the least.
Yeah. So, and thanks for that. So, yeah, what we do at Canopy, we are like selling service, end-to-end service of ground stations. So basically, we're enabling satellite operators to download and command their satellite with our network of ground stations. So that's one pillar. And this pillar is basically we are using a hybrid network of stations where we buy our own ground station that we implement in some location, in strategical locations, such as like the French overseas, where we have a competitive advantage, and we buy like specific stations that we believe are highly versatile and highly scalable. Um, but we also leverage existing ground stations. So as a little bit I was saying, like the Airbnb basically model of like a network that are already deployed and underused, and this enabled us this hybrid model to scale very fast, and we were able to scale like 15 stations in less than a year and a half. So this is on one side. On the other side, we are not stopping there. So we're not just providing the access to antenna, the antenna time. That is basically the standard ground station as a service provider play. We going one step further, and that's why we believe we are providing like an end-to-end ground station service, or said differently, a term that might be a bit confusing is connectivity, but it's low Earth orbit connectivity, connectivity for satellites in low Earth orbit. And it's confusing because when you talk about connectivity, usually you talk about like how low Earth orbit satellites can connect us with like broadband internet is like Starlink or OneWeb. So it's not really what we do. It's basically bringing this connectivity to, let's say, as an example, like low Earth orbit Earth observation constellation. And here, like so we're not just selling antenna time. What we do is that we're going to work closely with all of the onboard radio providers and antenna providers on board of the satellites, unique with like unique partnership with none of our competitor has. And basically, we're going to understand well their products to and how like the which frequency they're using, which modulation, which configuration. So we can sell on top when they sell a hardware, we can sell our service on top of this hardware, and it's truly like an end-to-end connectivity. It's not just like providing antenna time; it's just like providing this full like data link, basically.
Okay, so Pierre, if imagine I were a satellite operator and I have a constellation or a few satellites or a few Earth observation satellites, how was my life before SkyNopy and how is my life after SkyNopy?
Yeah. So I mean, before you would probably use your on station or like ground station, standard ground station as a service operators. After it's basically like in short term, you would use our system. So basically, like relatively same antenna, maybe more like a larger dish, so like a higher, like better data link. But it's not what matters. What matters is that your OPEX your price per data will be half of the price of that you are currently paying. So said differently, either for the same price you download twice more data, so it's a competitive advantage for your end customer because you can download like more data, more pictures, like um, and or said differently, if you're a smaller operator and you want to be more cost effective for the same amount of data, you pay half of the price that you are paying. And this is like, I would say, short term because like we can implement that with like as I said, like in 2 weeks we were able to demonstrate that. And short middle term. What's very exciting is about like the coming networks arriving in the market and where we're gonna lead this effort because we'll have like unmatched number of ground stations, basically the 100 station I was mentioning, is we're gonna enable you with the same interface. You get the same interface, ground interface, and we're going to enable you to transition your satellite into K-band capacity. So for your next generation satellites, and this is like 5 times more data rate and almost like a near real time download capacity. So this is a game changer for all of the two metrics that you care for. data rate and revisit time, and you go from like X band to K band, so 5 times more data rate, and from like a between like I don't know around like 1 hour revisit time to near real time.
You're the first one who pushes one step forward from simply ground segment as a service, right? You're the first one to do this, to offer this end-to-end service.
Yeah, so like historical positioning of players is to basically scale a network of ground station and offer like antenna time when like you have a satellites passing over, and this is amazing because it allowed all of the new space trend to basically go into the market because they didn't have to buy their own antenna. So amazing. We believe though that was not enough, and that's why we created SkyNopy, because we believe that we could scale first this network an order of magnitude more. But more than just having more station, that was not the end game, and we believe that now, like most of the players coming into the market, they want a true end-to-end service, meaning that having antenna time is not enough. As like when we take the analogy of the mobile phone, it's a bit as if like your mobile phone provider, so T-Mobile, AT&T, or like other, we're just providing you like they say, oh, here's the map of our station, our antenna. Just point your phone when you need to one of our antenna and like use this antenna time. No, I mean they provide a SIM card that does that for you, and so it's our vision is basically to provide not the hardware, but basically when the hardware they're going to use to know it well and to configure it well. So it's like they don't have to deal with all of the complexity of that.
Okay, but you don't have anything on board the spacecraft built by you. You just
Yeah,
work with the spacecraft design, like with the spacecraft engineers, to make sure that you are aligned so that they can work and connect with your ground stations, right?
yeah. So basically, indeed. So what we do is we work with radio. So like
Yep.
the organ on board of the satellite that is like sending the signal, radio plus antenna, with all of these equipment providers. So they ship to us in advance all of their equipment. We integrate them, we test them, we know them like closely, and so like that's when they sell their hardware to the satellite operator or like the platform provider. We already integrated their hardware on, so we already have like in terms of
Yep.
telecommunication
Yep. Yep.
integrated the satellites with our ground stations. So it's like
It's
end-to-end service. So it save money and time of like testing and integration for the end customer. But it's also what's truly we think like a game changer is that um, doing that, we can know more advanced modulation in this satellite, and we can provide that with these satellites using the same hardware. But and that basically we can unlock modes where the satellite operator will download much faster its data. So and here we're talking about like twice or 3 times more faster. So for the end customer is truly amazing because they for the same price, the same like amount of minutes they use like ground station, they download twice more data. Or said differently, for the same amount of data, they download it like half of the time needed, so half of the price at the end of the day. So this is like a game changer.
no, it is amazing, and it's like I'm an aerospace engineer myself, and it's things I remember I wasn't taught much in university because we tend to see, as you said, that you mentioned at the start, the industry as okay, you've got the rocket, you've got the satellite, you're good to go, and no, there's a lot more, and you've sort of taken a step forward because you like are even behind, be a layer behind the spacecraft component manufacturers, because you want to integrate their components in your network so that when they sell their components to the spacecraft manufacturers, they already, you already have that integration in place. It's a superb idea, indeed, indeed. Okay, so moving on to your pace, you started less than a year, well, around a year and a half, 2 years ago, and since then you've mentioned you've built a network of 15 ground stations. You've raised over 18 millions of euros in funding, and you've got big plans, right? Can you talk a bit about
Yeah,
that?
No, I think, I mean, we are definitely very excited by like how like the adventure took over. I mean, that was the goal from day one, to go fast. We're entering a market where we're basically late compared to what's happening, and but also being late or like needing to run very fast because like our customers wants to go fast to orbit and like faster and faster. So we knew that starting the adventure, it will be like we run or we die. Like we cannot walk. This was
Yeah.
not an option. So we created the company in October 2023. We
Okay.
fundraised like 3 million at the very beginning to basically have like the key contributors. So like the cybersecurity engineer, like the ground station engineers, like all of the developers to basically scale this team and be able to say, okay, guys, like if we want to keep up the pace and and take over like our latency in the market, we need to like within a year to have scaled a network that is comparable to what other ground station as a service provider can provide. And it's something we succeed in because like we're able to scale very fast because of leveraging stations that were underused.
Mm.
So not having the capex investment needed to scale such network. And we're in a position last spring where we saw that what we built, it was very fast, that we have a great commercial traction, and so we're in a very good position to talk again with investors. To be frank, we still had a lot of like runway. So it was not really our strategy at that point, but there were some investors like coming at us, and we enter in a discussion that was more like a preemption of a round than like a formal round. So it was not like an open round when we talked to like 30 investors. It was very limited, but the good news for us is that it went well, and within a month from like first conversation to like the term sheet, like we're able to sign this deal. And this for us it was great because as founders it was
Yeah.
the time that we could come back to talk to our customers, which is the most important thing.
Indeed, but that sort of brings, sounds or memories from US pace, right? Because you speak with, you didn't even look for it, or not directly at least, but within a month you were already raising more cash than you needed. That means that there's quite a lot of investor confidence, no? Or that investors really seem to like what you're building, right?
So yes, so also like to be completely transparent, I think like, I mean, the story went well and we're super happy, but it's also like there were investors who told us no, right? Like
Of
and
course.
especially when our first fundraising, we actually have like had more investors saying to us no than like saying yes. So I wouldn't say that we're like I don't know, like a AI company where everybody wanted to invest at either cost. But yeah, I think overall. So, and this I think it's important also to know. So beyond like what we believe is success, like the latest fundraising, behind that there is like a lot of like people who don't believe in what we do, or like like having no. And like the goal for us was to say, okay, I mean, we don't care like how many no's we got. Like what just matters is that we have one yes. So this is also key, and like and something that we, I mean, force us to stay very humble about it, because like it went well on this round, but let's face it, like what's tough is like the coming rounds.
Mhm.
And yeah, as we will go, it will be like harder and harder because we will have to demonstrate more and more. So we know like the I don't know, the not the difficulties, but like the challenges are ahead. But it's true that we are super happy. And like if 2 years ago you would have asked me like, what do you think you will be your equity story, or like the quality of the team that you're able to hire, or like the customers that you're able to hook, I would not have believed that we would be in this stage. So this is like, I would say, a very good news. But again, it's like a teamwork, and also thanks for the great association that I have with my co-founder, and honestly, like the amazing team we were able to build to be at this level and to have something interesting for investors.
I can imagine there's a lot more hidden, in the background that people don't get to see, so that has made you reach this point. That's 100% for sure. I had one question, because I imagine starting off wasn't really easy. Okay, you might convince some investors and get some money, but how do you go about it? It's like building your own ground stations, and as you have done in French overseas territory, and sort of speaking with those ground station operators so that they lend you some ground station time. How do you go about those two tasks? Because that doesn't seem easy.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's like, I mean, starting a company is not easy because at the very beginning you have like nothing. And so you need like the first believers that are investors, customers, supplier, or like
Mhm.
other that, or like, uh, yeah, advisors or stuff like this. And I think I would say building a space company is even more difficult because you need like at some point like a early investment that is cannot be just small. I think I would say it's maybe more difficult to build like a rocket startup or like a or satellite startup. For ground station, the good news is that the asset is on the ground, so you can maintain it. It's maybe also like less capex intensive than like a rocket or constellation. So here in that way, like that helps. What helped us a lot was this idea of like leveraging also like additional assets or reducing the capex needed to run your business and being able to run our business like with very small investments. But indeed, we were in a situation where we needed to convince investors, but also suppliers. We needed to convince satellite operators so customers, but also suppliers in the sense of
Yep.
operators who have their own ground stations. And I mean, they can have two positions. The first one is they're ready to commercialize their assets, or they're already doing that, but they ask you like why you instead of like the market, like I mean already existing players in the market that are more mature, more like safe and so on.
Exactly.
Or most of them, to be frank, they were not in the position. They were more like, oh, we've been having this asset for ages, is like safe, proprietary, uh, we control it, and like, yeah, I mean, to a point, okay, to generate revenue from that, but like, I don't know, that's like that sounds very sketchy. It's a little bit like before Airbnb. Like, I mean, would you be ready to share and like rent your apartment for just a weekend, not like a 6 months, right? Like just a weekend to someone you never met and who is actually not like from your country and like you don't know. I mean, not really, but like the what Airbnb succeed to do is like to make it like trustable and like and okay. And basically, it was our work. I would say. I mean, I think we've been we've been lucky. I think, yeah, I would say two things that help at the very beginning. The first thing is relationship, is human relationship. As I mentioned, we are two former employees of on myself, like of OneWeb, on my co-founder side, like of Utelsat. It's basically the relationship that we had built at that time in our former work relationship, where like we kept them and they were good. And I think it's maybe, yeah, one key lesson learned that I got from that is like, yeah, like the your career will be a long path, and it's I mean, I was lucky, but I think ideally is like to keep good relationship anywhere you go, because I mean, space is like a very small ecosystem, and when you're gonna change job, you're gonna surely like meet again like different people. So and some situation is very tough because you might have like a conflict and so on, but it's to keep that in mind. The second thing that helped, I think, was like a very good understanding of the market, and because a lot of people believe that the lower orbit market will is like and we talk about mega constellation and we say, oh, how can we address like Kuiper or like OneWeb or like Starlink? Our vision of this market is that it's not an addressable market. But what we believe is that instead of having one or, well, like let's say, three players who send like 1,000 of satellites, we believe that we might have like 100 player that send like 30 satellites. So at the end of the day, it's like the same n number, but it's just like distributed across like a lot of different players. And we need to adapt to that. And this convince suppliers of antenna to say, okay, we believe SkyNopy somehow like they hacked that commercial part. And maybe the last thing is that they, in terms of technical expertise, especially with my co-founder, they saw that we were like trustworthy, because like they understood that we were understanding like what we are doing technically.
What you just said about the future of the market is very interesting, because it's true that I have a similar opinion to you, because it's true there will be a few very very large mega constellations, Starlink, Project Kuiper, and so on, and other countries' projects. But it's true that I'm starting to see more and more announcements and projects and planned small, relatively small constellations of 30, 50, 100 satellites for every type of thing that you can think of. And it's true that that's a very big market to address, because those are the companies or the projects that don't have the capital to build their own ground station, their proprietary ground stations, as I guess OneWeb,
Yeah.
Starlink, and so on are doing.
Yeah, and I mean, if I can share something that all of these elements are public, but when I was in OneWeb, in Airbus OneWeb, so we are basically we had built this huge assembly line that could produce two satellites per day. The goal is like to think like the next chapter and to say, okay, how can we commercialize this capability, industrial capability, to other constellation. And so we started looking for other constellation. The reality of the market is that with the price, like the non-recurring price of adapting the assembly line to a new customer, we needed to have a new customer who wanted like 100 of satellites. So we are like desperately looking for, during like 3 years, to this type of customers. The reality is that this customer never arrived, because there are not a lot of customers in the market who are able, I mean, were able back in the days to launch 100 satellites. The reality is that by that time, during these 3 years, when we were like accumulating all of the interest for this assembly line, there was actually more than like 100 satellites interested, but they were like scattered around like maybe 30 or like maybe 50 operators. And Airbus or Airbus OneWeb was not really fitted to address this market, because they were like this non-recurring price that couldn't be like split across like different lot of satellites. And it's where like they found Loft Orbital, and the match of the two were very. I mean, to me, it was very inspiring, because Airbus was diminishing by a lot the recurring price, and Love was diminishing the non-recurring price. So at the end of the day, you had like big corporation, big industrial, who can build like a huge machine, and like a smaller entity who can like commercialize it. And this partnership was very inspiring, and I think very efficient. And so that's basically what we try to build when we're at SkyNopy, is basically having like this partnership with much bigger and industrial player who can offer their capacity, but themselves that cannot really commercialize it, because like it's not in their DNA. They have like non-recurring costs that are like barriers of entry, and it's like this partnership that's a great story to tell.
I didn't know the story about OneWeb in the past, but it's true that there's not many very large constellations planned. It's just too expensive, and so you have to have the capital to build it and also to launch it, which is it's not negligible either. But also, so we talk about how was it to build and to assemble the first the initial network of ground stations. How was the conversation on the other side, with the customers, with the actual customers, and the I'll call them like suppliers of the components manufacturers
Yeah.
who, how does that other side of the conference, because okay, you've talked about how to deal with the ground stations and how to build that network. Okay, how to move, turn around and speak with the customers.
Oh yeah. So I think for with the onboard radio providers, like the equipment providers, I think honestly, like the conversation was much easier. I mean, of course, at
Of
the,
course, it makes
at the
sense.
beginning, they are just like curious about like they never heard of you, so they are a bit like dubitative and like very like. But most of them they have a positioning where they just sell hardware and they know like all of the customer they're selling hardware to, they have a question on how they integrate this hardware to ground stations. So it's they know that basically their customer
That's
have
a
this
problem.
issue. So
Yeah.
it was not always, I mean, it was not, we didn't convince all of them, right? But like we saw that we could really establish the dialogue so they can like, and for us it's a little bit at no cost, so they have a partnership that accelerate their sales, so that's pretty efficient. Now like your question about the customers, so of course as like a new player it's always difficult to enter the market because people are just like saying that, I mean, they don't know you, they already have a solution that exists that efficient. I think, and what's the thing is that you need to convince like just one customer at the beginning to work well with him and to say and to have like their feedback and their statement that can you can use to like convince another customer. For us, one of our first customer was Endurosat, so the Bulgarian company,
Yeah.
where basically we helped them to better integrate their radio to ground station they had. We showed them like in orbit with a satellite that we could operate very easily their satellites, and they trust us more and more about our expertise of like this end-to-end system, and this helped us to like go seek other customers. And recently in the spring, what we've done basically we offered different tests, free tests of licensing for free some of our station to existing satellites in orbit, and to demonstrate that we're like within 2 weeks we're able to do the licensing and with the already onboard equipment that they had to operate the satellites and download data. And and this we believe like has been like a very convincing program where that enabled us to basically operate more than 10 satellites, and among them there was the Airbus Pléiade Neo satellites, so basically operating at like a data rate that is like very that is way beyond like the data rates we talk usually when we talk about new space players, and we're able to keep that pace. And this was, I think, very convincing for such customers. And when we work with satellites such as like the Pléiade Neo satellites, then that also help us to go convince like
Indeed.
Constellation and other players.
And how do you achieve that speed? Because like all the, I was going to ask you later, but you mentioned it, all the licensing and getting all the permissions and setting up everything historically has taken a lot longer, right? For regular missions to set it up. How come you do it so fast?
So here again, I think, I mean, so everybody in the market tries to push the regulatory aspects to be faster, because like we all
Of
need
course.
to have like a more streamlined process. So also as we are arriving late in the market, that's also easier for us, right? To accelerate on that. Also now like the other answer is like we rely on players that for now like already have their ground stations, so they already had built this relationship with the regulatory framework, and so that enabled us to go faster. And we are not starting from scratch and say, okay, like we need to install this new antenna and to go
Okay.
convince the local government to like file, I mean, to do the licensing of the station and so on. And so, like, I mean, and something that is key for us, like the French Space Agency has also helped us, like in our early days, to like figure out some of these elements. So that's been also helpful for us.
Okay, that's why you're also growing your ground segment on the French overseas territories, which I believe is easier for you to set up in a shorter time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, geography in this in our business is
Okay.
definitely, I mean, can be an asset or is definitely like a challenge, and it could be an advantage. So being French and having no competitors in France is like really writing the story of like how we could leverage this asset to be strategically well placed, and like and leverage this asset to be a global company, and in terms of geography, but also in terms of value proposition. Say like all of the satellite players and operators in the world would need at some point to have this large network, and French overseas are definitely an asset for that.
You mentioned that you can, with your ground station technology and your interaction with the with the component manufacturers, you can increase the downlink speed. Can you, at least in a non technical way, or at least not going into a lot of details, how can you do that? And perhaps why has it not been done before in the way that you've done it?
Yeah.
If yeah.
Yeah, I think it has not been done because so for two reasons. One, the first one is that the positioning of ground station as a service providers is great because it transforms like capex into opex needs. So it enables all of the new space players basically to exist today. But where it's not good at is like considering that radio frequency and telecommunication is an entire system and is an end-to-end point. Is like you have 2 points. You have the ground station and you have the satellites. So it's a market where basically all of the new space players, so they're happy because they have like a launcher as a service. They just need to like figure out their satellites, and they know they will have like antenna time, but they need to integrate all of the telecommunication equipment, test them, and also like define basically their telecommunication data link. For that, they need to hire like engineers and so on. As most of the time they want to go fast to orbit, they take like the easiest modulation, and like and basically you have we enter a market where all of the new space players, they use like 50% of the data link budget. They could all download, like, I mean, most of them download twice more data and twice faster. And so what we do, if they had like this integrated vision, so what we do for that is to pre-integrate all of the radio in the market, and it's basically the work we do with the equipment, and we enable to unlock modes of these radios with the same hardware that go like with one like twice more data rate, or like sometimes 3 times more data rate. And so at the end of the day, the satellite operators, they're just operating the same hardware but with much higher speed.
And well, that essentially is everything, no? Because the point of sending a satellite to space is to receive the data that that satellite generates. So yeah,
Yeah,
essentially that's the core of the business for the satellite
yeah, yeah, yeah.
operator.
And fully agree, and so that's why, like, I mean, we are, of course, like, it's way more sexy to say, okay, we're building like a rocket company or like a satellite company. I mean, ground station is like kind of like the poor children of space, because like it's something that you can handle like late in the program, or you could handle late in the program, that you can retrofit, you can maintain, so all of that, and it does not go to space, so it has like less fame around it. But our experience was that it is now like the bottleneck of all of the space systems. So we believe it was like the right thing to address.
And now that you mentioned that it's that is the bottleneck, which is true, how do you how do you see the future? Would you prefer to own then in your ground station network? Would you prefer to own the hardware of the ground stations, or you're happy with sort of partnering with existing ground stations operators and growing that way?
Yeah, so I think, so basically we believe that ideally we want like the best of all worlds. So it's basically keeping like a hybrid system. So we see that we have so it's basically building like our competitive advantage based on each deals or like that we can have. So having privileged access to French overseas, it's where we want to build our competitive advantage, so having our own station over there. Now, like having a privileged relationship to some ground station network that are already existing, and we can access like in a very like preference or like a exclusive way. There we want to double down on that, and so why one reason why we're able to announce this fundraising and accelerate is that we're going to soon announce in September like a partnership with a ground station network that enables us to scale to more than 100 antenna all over the world. So like basically like one order of magnitude more than like the player in the market. So we believe this is really a game changer.
That's amazing. I'll pay attention in September to make sure I listen to the announcement. I'm very happy. So that way you'll have your challenge, because when you got the fundraise, the recent fundraise, you were already saying that you planned on growing your network to 100 plus ground stations. So you're taking the steps to achieve that. I see. That's very good to hear. That's very good to hear. Okay, and how do you see the future of the satellite connectivity market in that respect? Because the amount of downlink of data produced in space is just going to grow. You know, we see Starlink. I don't have an idea of how much data do Starlink satellites produce, but it must be a lot. All the satellite constellations that are planned, all the Earth observation missions. There's a growing demand for more and more ground station hardware and ground station efficiency. How do you see that growing? And also, if I can associate that question to another one, I guess your solution will eventually become like the norm, no, the standard, because what satellite operator wouldn't want to maximize their downlink capacity, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts about like the standardization of your approach to downlink?
Mm. So in terms of market, and that's also why we created the company. So we adopt kind of like a pick and shovel strategy, right? Like we believe there is a gold rush, and we don't necessarily want ourselves to be part of this gold rush. But what we do is that we sell out of the pick and shovels to help other to dig for the gold and maybe like get rich on that. But we're just like selling the infrastructure for that. And we believe that this market, and we are very confident to this market because, I mean, when you see the trends, like you have constantly, it's been like 3 years that the market has like doubled. Sometimes between years, it has like a quadruple. It's like has been multiplied by 4. You can see like a proxy for that. For example, like the number of SpaceX transporter launch that are solely sending like small satellites. I mean, before they were none, and then like after 2 years, they were like 4 per year, and they're like accelerating, and like now like selling like an offer of bandwagon, so like more launches, but like with more like equatorial inclination. So this is a proxy. You also see that each player, each satellite operator, is now producing much more data than yesterday because they have like much more like having like better resolution of equipment. So they're going towards like the video with like hyperspectral applications. So all of the new applications are using more data. And when you think about it, it's like a bit like the history of like what happened with like YouTube or like the smartphone connectivity, right? Like you have like 2G, then 3G, then 4G, and because like no matter what, like how you use smartphone, like you will always like fill the pipe if it's like a bigger pipe. And
Yeah.
so that's where we're confident. And then like there are also hypotheses that for now are just hypotheses, but like we believe will with like accelerates the market by a lot. And it's basically like a starship hypothesis. If like this launcher is like going to market, then like there will be a significant cost reduction for satellites, and then it means that's like for us it's like more and more funding for our customers that will be excited about this news, and more customers and more like application that uh, we can we can offer our service to. And to answer your second part of the question, we believe that I mean, talking about data rate and say, okay, to all of the satellite operators, like you can download your data twice faster or like half of the price. Yeah, it's like a game changer, and that's what like we that's how we basically grow commercially. That being said, we believe that the end game is not really about telling them like, oh, like, yeah, we have that many stations, or we can to talk about them like to talk with them about like our data rate or stuff like this. At the end of the day, if we reuse like the analogy of like mobile phone connectivity, when you think about it, like when you go with a mobile phone operator, you don't really know. I mean, I think it's very rare that you're gonna check really like how many antennas they have or like
No, no.
frequency, data rates, stuff like. I mean, you just say, okay. I mean, it seems that they have like a monthly fee that is okay. Sometimes they have advantages that enables you to have like a cheaper smartphone or stuff like this, and it's basically how you make your decision. And so we believe that we're going to more and more enter a world where satellite operators might less and less care for all of these topics. But that being said, it's like it's going to still be like very tough
Of course.
to all of this system, but it will just be like transparent for the end customer.
That's an amazing point, because it's sort of seeing it from the customer's perspective and not selling it as as an aerospace engineer, right? It's like, no, I focus on what you need and what you want. And but also this, would you then consider SkyNopy a space company or a telecoms company?
Yeah, no, that's true. I think so. Basically, we're a space company, but like we're we believe that ideally we would like to be a telecom company, and some analogy we can say we're MVNO, so we are basically leveraging others antenna, but we're a telecom company, but for a new territory that is low Earth orbit, that is like not really connected. So that
Mhm.
yeah, it's how we think ourselves.
Yeah, we're building the antennas for low Earth orbit, right?
Yeah,
That's that's a very very interesting concept, eh? And a very good way of selling, because you have to think how the customer, what the customer wants. I mean, when I take my phone, I don't check the data rate that my internet provider gives me. As long as it works, I'm happy, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But okay, now moving back to Europe, you've built the company a year and a half in October 2023 in France. How is it building in Europe compared to what you might have seen from your experience in different places of the world?
Yeah.
And yeah, what's your thoughts? Racing in Europe for you, it has been comparatively easy to others, but how's your experience building in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, through my experience, I saw that. I mean, the US is really leading this market and is really where a lot of extremely inspiring companies and projects are being built. So for us, it's always like a source of inspiration and it's also a source of inspiration a model, but also like a market for us. So
Yeah.
from day one, we talk to our previous connection and prospects in the US because and more globally with like a global market. So like customers in Asia, in Africa as well. So that's the first thing. But like we needed to decide like the location of like starting a company. What we saw is that in terms of HR and talents, my experience at least is that in the companies I've been to, like when we were hiring people, I noticed that like French engineers and European engineers were extremely good and like really, really skilled and sharp. And in a lot of cases, they people I would hire would become from Europe, would become like leads of their engineering teams. And I mean, if you go to the Bay Area, like a lot of like European are like actually leading like or teams, engineering teams in like big GAFAM companies. So
I've seen that in other companies as well.
yeah, and this made me super, I mean, proud of being European, but also like very confident that you could build like a very strong and like global companies with these assets. And at the end of the day, it's like actually yeah, I mean, you could really build that. But now, like, we don't see that many European company as thriving as like US company does. And so we ask ourselves, okay, so what's the secret sauce of US company? Because it's not really, I don't believe it's like HR or it's talents. So how they can accelerate? We believe it's like through funding. So that's why we want to replicate a method to be able to fund like very fast and like, and yeah, like we don't have like time for like spending too much time with investors. Then we need to accelerate constantly. I think it's also in terms of mindset. It's like how, I mean, understanding that it's a race. It's like a global race, so it's not like the goal. The end goal is not to sell to, I don't know, a service to a French player or a French operator, or like it's like to sell like globally. And so that's why like we need to go fast. And so yeah, that's, I think, the mindset that we try to push in our company, and to having this mindset. And but we are, for now we're very excited and very happy to have started in Europe, because we do see like a lot of support. We do see like extremely skilled talents that we are able to hire, and we see that it's not because we're in Europe that we cannot attract like funding from elsewhere. So next step for us is probably to go like open other offices elsewhere than Europe.
Of course, it makes sense to address those markets in a more like, yeah, direct way. That that's You won't be the first one doing that. That's for
Yeah.
sure. But one question first is, now that you were mentioning about talent and the importance of talent, and the fact that Europe has very very good talent, because it's true, we've got one of the, like, among the best universities globally. Many of them are in Europe. What has been harder? Because they say HR hiring and all that related to talent is very difficult, and you've mentioned yourself that great part of what you've done is thanks to the great team that you have. In a way, you could say, what has been more difficult, building the actual product and the actual company, or building the talent that your team, not the talent that's working with you?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, yeah, hiring can be extremely difficult. I think I would say that we've been very lucky for now, because like we started like our like first, like finding the right co-founder is like something that, I
Yeah.
mean, you can you can spend like years trying having the right match between like the person and like the your fits, like what you want. Are you aligned with like the objectives and the idea, and like so, and the timeline? So this, I think, was like something I was very fortunate about. And same for the first employees. I think we were able to hire from our network people who were like extremely motivated, extremely sharp, who can like ramp up like very fast on topics. And I would say, when you start hiring the right people, and the right meaning like the super like sharp people, the product is still an issue, is always an issue, but like you can find way around. And what's key also is that like the other hiring is like easier, because good people attract good people. And I think
Yes.
like, I mean, we've been extremely demanding. I mean, our hiring process is like several steps. You have like home challenges, you have like life challenges, and for a small company like ours, like a lot of feedbacks from candidates that are like, I mean, guys, like, you're extremely demanding. And we literally applied the motto of like, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And I mean, that's tough, because like we see candidates that we would like to work with them, but like sometimes we see that, I don't know, there is some doubt, or like, and so we have to remind ourselves constantly that we put this rule in an application. So say, okay, well, we pass, and maybe we'll find someone better later. And like we accept that some projects or some stuff, like they are being delayed, maybe because we don't we didn't find the right people. But it's like this, yeah, this like being demanding on like the people, that I think helps being like the right team, and then being building the right product and service.
it, it makes sense, because if the team is the foundation of the company, you want to make sure that the foundation is right, is the one that you want. That's 100% Correct. And now looking back in this time, what would you have done differently? Well, let's see. What has been the greatest, your greatest success, or what are you most proud of over these years, nearly 2 years? And if you were to start again now, what would you have done differently, if anything, of course?
Yeah, that's a good exercise to do.
That's your homework for the interview.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, I think, I mean, I think I would, maybe I would have accepted that at the beginning it was okay not to please everyone or to seduce everyone. It's tough because you're in a position at the beginning where you have basically nothing. So when someone like being a supplier, a customer, or like an advisor or like an investor says yes to you, or like is pleased about your solution or your company or your idea, then it's like a victory because you can most of the time use that for convincing like someone else and back and forth. So you put yourself in mindset where you want to please everyone, and sometimes I think you need to accept that you need to pick your battles, and not all of the battles are worth like, I mean, are important for the growth of the company, or like maybe they're all important but not to the same like extent. So I think I would have maybe picked more wisely the battles, or I would have been maybe less impacted. For example, for the fundraising, the first fundraising, we received a lot of no, and sometimes it was tough. I mean, we're confident that we'll close that deal, but it was tough. And even though, like after the fact, you say, "Oh yeah, we raised like 3 million in like 3 weeks." I mean, that's great. We're super happy, but still, it was like very tough, and we did receive a lot of no. So I think I would have less. I would have been like less impacted by this, and maybe in terms of yeah, maybe less spend less time into convincing people that, I mean, they couldn't be convinced anyway at the stage that we were at, because they would not believe in startups at this stage. And maybe, I mean, I've seen that with previous companies after the fact, like I don't know, like a few millions later or a few years later, they are like they're super excited about the product you're building. They are highly believing in you, but yeah, so I think I would have less sensitive to that, I would say. And I think what worked well is, I don't know, is truly building this team, because we think that, I mean, and let's also be humble about it, like we're just like we're still a super small company and like super young one. Hiring was not that tough because we like, well, we're 15 people for now, so it's not a lot of people. Um, but I think there is a very high level of trust within the company to basically deploy and develop our service. Yeah, and this like makes us like very. I mean, we feel that we're all in the same boat, like, and that enables us to go fast, basically, towards the same goal.
That's that's awesome, and indeed important to. I like what you said about picking your battles, because yeah, it requires a lot of, yeah, like, I would say discipline and experience, so to say, to know where to put your energy to make the
Mm.
company grow. That's
Yeah, and I think that's tough to, yeah, as I was saying, like to change your mindset, because you're in mindset where you need to convince anyone you see in the street even, and at some point to step back and say, well, okay, this is the mindset I have, but like I need to like also have another mindset. So okay, what truly matters, and like some stuff say, okay, let's not be impacted by this person's opinion, because actually it's have like little impact to what we're doing.
okay. Now I think, Pierre, we should wrap up soon, but I have two more questions. One is, what do we expect from SkyNopy over the in the short term, 1 to 3 years, let's say. What are we as followers of SkyNopy looking to hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think next month or like a few weeks, we're gonna announce this huge partnership to scale the network, and then like we clearly like we have a year ahead where, I mean, our call motto is like we need to deliver now. we like, funding is like behind us, so like, that's great. This has been secured. The team has been secured, but still need to grow. So like we need to do that, and now like we need like with the players that we have on the chessboard, like now we need to deliver and like to be like at the level that our customer expect us to go seek like more customers and to grow like the ground station network as well.
Awesome, awesome. And to the audience listening, what would be your advice to someone who's looking or thinking or considering to start his own space startup?
Well, I mean, um, I mean, for now at least, for me, the journey has been super exciting. And I might like maybe in a year we'll meet and we'll say, okay, never start like your own startup. Like I don't know, I might change opinion, right? Like, and we're again like a very early stage company, so but no, I think what I loved is that for myself, I was basically feeling that in my previous work jobs, like I was doing a lot of like intrapreneurship. So basically like convincing people, like building teams, and but I was not really leading like the boat completely. And so now I feel that I honestly I do a lot of similar things that I was doing before, but now it's like for my own company, and I can like I can blow my own vision and also the own like mindset of people like trying to stay very like curious about like different stuff, trying to stay very humble, but also like valuing a lot of like performance and like and facts and deliverables. So having this building this culture of that I build. And the second thing that I enjoyed a lot and I would recommend is like the human adventure, and especially with my co-founder, I think it has been something that in terms of mindset and of like as a human, I that helped me grow a lot because we faced like times where we disagreed or stuff like this, and like we learn how to beg from apologies like for the other, or like to grow, to be convinced, to trust something where we had doubts. And this was really a human adventure. And like I don't know, maybe like the company will fail, we won't succeed like what we, but like this will remain. It's like all of this human relationship that we built. And so this is something that I know has been won already, and so this is great. And so that's why someone to launch his company, I guess it's going to be a long process. I guess it's going to be painful at some point, but that might be extremely exciting for like a personal reason. And if you can add like the human aspect to it, then like, I think that's a win. So yeah.
That'll make building your company extremely worthwhile, as you said.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's great to hear. It's been a pleasure to have you, Pierre. I think we will speak in a year's time to see
This
how
was
you've progressed and to see if you've reached the 100 plus number in your ground stations segment. So thanks a lot, and yeah, looking forward to that announcement.
Thanks a lot. It was great talking to you, and thanks for this opportunity.